I mean the floor, ground floor. On the next morning after our hiking trip, we left the house quite early. To first of all go into the village, but also to go onto the other side of the village from which you could take panoramic shots of it. And once we walked there all the way, Stefan was like, oh, we can't just walk a circle around it now. Which, after we started it, was proven to be more difficult than it is. And I'm yet again trying to show you a few clips of the hike that are gonna be somewhat shaky, but I think not as much as certain parts from the previous video. And you're actually not really seeing how difficult it was at times, because we really did wing it and walk quite randomly, often on parts that weren't necessarily walking paths. So that was an interesting experience, but we got really nice views and it was a really chill morning, so I can't really complain about it, to be honest with you. And I mean, from as much as you can see, I think you can tell as well that it was quite beautiful. And after we finished our hike and walked a bit through the village, we went back to the house to have breakfast before we left Khinaliq for good. However, the last minute we spent in Khinaliq, we asked our guide if he might speak some Khinaliq language in our video. Now, as I've told you before, there was a language barrier, so I'm still worrying to this point if he might be just speaking Azeri, but I don't think he is. I think he's actually speaking the village language. And if he does, then this is a very rare clip coming up now, because only about 1,500 people speak this language and it's listed as endangered actually. So while I don't have any translation for what he's saying, you can just enjoy listening to a language you might never actually hear in real life unless you're going to the village yourself.
Deməli, qoyluq məhəlliyə muzeyi demə arxeoloji qazıntı xidmə xeyr, elə bir Bakılı kafeyə arxeoloji qazıntı çıxı durma xeyr qədim əşyalardır, yəni Tunc dövrə aid əşyalarda qaldırılma, hər bütün muzey sərgilənmiş qarma, qabıq gəzi rahatla çıxıya əşyalardır. Lepşin quydurma, tarix şili maraqlanmış an quydurma. Bərabərdən Xinalıq qonaq evməyə işlətmişlərmə. Belə.
Driving back from Khinaliq to Quba, I couldn't help but feel in awe from the amazing landscapes we're seeing on the road, and that did lead me to pull out my camera all the time and film about 13 clips, whereas only certain parts of 8 of them were tolerable enough to be shown here, since we had a quite heavy car and also the road isn't that good. A lot of it was too shaky to be used, but I think I still got a good amount of footage to give you a good example of how the area actually looks like. And I'm not gonna say that much actually, and rather want you to sit back and enjoy the beautiful, beautiful rough scenery of northern Azerbaijan, while also keeping in mind that this is nearing the very end of this series, since the next video is gonna be the last one, which makes me sad myself and also kind of makes me to want to go back to this country. We didn't really have anything planned out for the rest of the day, so after we arrived back in Quba, we immediately went to the town of Qusar. Now if you look it up on Google, you find quite a few nice pictures, but for most of them it's rather obvious that the things you should see aren't really in town. But according to Google Maps, there was supposed to be a tourist information center, so we thought we could just go there and find out what's reachable for us, realistically speaking. However, once we got there, we realized it was just an administrative building, and I don't know who tagged it as a tourist information, but it definitely wasn't one. So we went to a local supermarket and asked somebody if there was any tourist information center, but the man working there just seemed very confused by the question, so that didn't work out the way we thought it would. At least from above the town looks quite nice, which I definitely wanted to show you. And then when we went back into town, we decided to try to find somebody speaking Lezgian, since that's the language we could have recorded when being in Lhasa, which is the village we planned to hike to from Khinaliq, if you remember that. Lezgian is classified as a vulnerable language by UNESCO. And it took quite a while to find somebody willing to be on camera. That was the actual challenge, not the finding of somebody who speaks it. But eventually we went into a small shop where some lady agreed to actually be on camera. So while I don't speak the language and hence I can 100% say this is definitely Lezgian, I strongly believe though, because to my mind she spoke quite well Russian, which makes it a lot easier to explain people what we want from them. So here's about 25 seconds of that.
Kelebera direkt kitabar təbiniz var. Abturiyeta direkt inlak kısa kitabar açız var. Direkt bu şabat direkt açız var. Za direkt kitabar izva iniz Lezgi halk tez kitabar buz var. Abur mektep diz hatsı var. Direkt abturiyent kitabar za inlak buz var.
And here we're showcasing the apartment we stayed at last night. We're currently about to leave, but we didn't want to forget to film it like we did once. So here it is. It's quite large for its price and very central. Well, not really central, but very comfortably located. Now here you're seeing Quba, which we sadly barely have any footage from because 90% of the time we were there it was raining. And we went up to the point where we are in this clip right when we got back from Qusar, so we could photograph the viewpoint and then just walk down, which means chronologically it doesn't really make sense in that order since this happened before we filmed the accommodation, but otherwise we would have had two clips of accommodation next to each other and I wanted to avoid that since that would have been kind of weird. Now I'm gonna switch to the actual audio in a second here, and I just want you to brace yourself because it's gonna be quite loud thanks to the wind. But if you really concentrate on it, you can hear the mosque singing in the background, and I wanted you to be able to do that. This part with the grey roofs and the red buildings and red roofs is the Jewish area, and then all that's behind the river, that's not a river anymore, is the actual town. And we're not gonna go to the actual town today, but we're gonna walk around the Jewish area. Also, if you listen really closely, but I'm not sure if you're gonna hear it, there's the mosque singing currently going on. I think it just stopped. So this is the next apartment showcase, which apparently is now a section of our travel vlog, I guess. It's quite a nice apartment. It might be one of the best we actually had, given the price. Well, I mean it's not that cheap, but it's still quite nice. The floor is kind of odd, like it has an odd texture, so it's not the most comfortable to walk on, to be honest, but besides that, it's quite nice, it's quite big, with like even 2 rooms, so yeah, it hasn't the best location, but then again we're going to the airport tomorrow morning, so that's quite comfortable. We're going to be driven there. That was not good grammar. Yeah, that's about it as usual. Also on the street you can get like really cheap street food. If you know what döner or shawarma is basically.
It tastes really good.